So I think what you mentioned, Tony, around if the malware executes, right, that
Hmm.
you can have visibility on the EDR side of things. But if not, probably it would be a good idea to bring in a sandbox and execute it there, right? So to combining
Absolutely.
these kind of visibilities is kind of good stuff, helpful.
Absolutely. And for folks that may not be familiar with what Red Canary does, we use a lot of EDR telemetry to do continuous monitoring and detection. And EDR, I like to tell people, is kind of a dual-edged sword in this manner of it does some really great things, some really awesome things to be able to detect malware in the wild. However, it also has that dual mission of stopping the malware in the wild, which is really awesome for EDR customers. However, if you're a threat intelligence person, it sometimes leaves you wanting a little bit more detail. And that's where the sandbox comes in. That's where, your EDR has to be performant. It's not going to tell you all of those file read operations. It's not going to tell you when the processor is queried for certain properties for anti-sandboxing, things like those. So that's where the sandboxes come in. That's absolutely where things like VMRay comes in for us to be able to work with those really high quality, high amounts of data from a sandbox report that actually lets us attribute specific malware families, even if they didn't fully execute on a system. We can run those on something where we know they'll execute and be able to figure out what they were.
Yeah, I think the also one of the very interesting differences between those two systems, and I really like this what you're saying, that basically they nearly have to come together because like
Mhm.
if you want to have more enriched data, then basically you need a sandbox. But of course, having an EDR system installed on an end device is usually on the front line, basically. So you get
Yeah,
the samples, you get the fresh techniques that are being out there, and of course, then throwing them into sandbox gives you more visibility. And of course, then you have speed and time is another factor, right? So the
mhm.
EDR needs to jump in as quick as possible, versus if you already throw it into a sandbox, then you basically have time, like a couple of minutes, to
Yes,
fully let this detonate, let this run, and get out the most IOCs that you basically can get from the analysis.
Yeah, when the topic
absolutely.
comes to EDRs, I think there is a lot to share. And I think recently I came across, I think a ransomware group shared a list of EDRs that they tested internally. So there were kind of some buzz around the effectiveness of that. But uh, I think from this conversation, it can be understood clearly that there's a value there. But at the end of the day, for full visibility, of course, some other tools can come
Yeah,
into picture, and with different capabilities, right? So to complete the picture,
absolutely.
is that the right? Yep. Okay.
And to complement that, I know organizations that have their own on-premises sandbox solution where they've bought something that's an on-premises sandbox. They still put an EDR sensor on their image that they use with that on-premises sandbox, so they can have an idea of here's the complete information that the sandbox gives us, plus what does the EDR cover in the middle of all of it. So there's definitely room to have both solutions. Both of them definitely serve their individual purposes. And of course, you never want to have to argue for the budget for both of them. However, they will both help every organization of at least a certain size that has to work with cybersecurity issues.